Hi, welcome to FSC Slapton Lee. My name is Jon Read, and I'm here to interview Scott Davidson here on the importance of wetlands in terms of carbon storage. Here's Scott, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Scott Davidson. I'm a lecturer in ecosystem resilience at the University of Plymouth.
Excellent. Scott's here with us today, and so we're just going to discuss the importance of wetlands across the world here. And would you mind starting off by telling us exactly what a wetland is?
Well, a wetland is a type of habitat that is either permanently or seasonally flooded. That means that the water table is either at or near the surface of the soil. Wetlands occur all around the world. They can be salt marsh, mangroves, and here in the UK we have bogs, fens and swamps.
Excellent, thanks for that. Now here in Slapton we're quite lucky because just around the corner here we've got quite an extensive wet woodland. It's quite a rare habitat in the UK, so can you maybe explain the extent and the importance of wet woodlands?
So wet woodlands are a unique habitat. They're a type of wetland, but they have trees as well. And so they can be dominated by trees such as alder or willow, and they can be peat forming as well. So they're a type of peatland as well as being a forested woodland.
Oh, excellent. So it's sort of like multiple layers going on there. And what are the real benefits of wet woodlands in terms of climate change or reducing the impacts of climate change?
So we don't know very much about wet woodlands, which makes them quite exciting as a research topic. But the benefit of a wet woodland is it combines the ability to store carbon in their soil and their peat, like other wetlands do, but they also store carbon in their trees and the above ground biomass. So the sweet spot of having both above ground and below ground carbon makes them a real winner in the fight against climate change.
So how do wetlands store carbon?
Wetlands store carbon because they're wet, so that soil has no oxygen in it because the water is there. And so the organic matter, the leaf litter from the trees or the vegetation falls onto the soil and builds up over time. It doesn't decompose because decomposition is limited because there's no oxygen. And so it holds onto that carbon rather than releasing it to the atmosphere.
Right, so these are really important stores of carbon then.
We don't know yet. That's the interesting thing, is they're so understudied in the UK compared to other wetland types like blanket bogs that we don't know how much carbon is being stored in their soil or in their trees. But we kind of assume because they have the benefit of having both trees and carbon in their peat and soil, they will be a benefit for climate change in terms of how much carbon they store. All
right, so this is your sort of field of expertise, of course. So why do you think it's not particularly well studied compared to other wetlands?
Well, they're quite rare in the UK. We estimate there's only 50 to 70,000 hectares left across the whole UK. There should be much more of them, but they've been kind of removed through land clearing, agriculture over centuries. But also I think working in them isn't easy. They're pretty wet, they're entanglement of roots, of branches, of twigs, of stems, and so they're not the easiest ecosystems to work in. Unlike a blanket bog, there's no canopy there, it's quite open, it's hard to work in these systems, but that's what makes them really exciting.
Oh yeah, so there's lots of potential discoveries there, and there's potential huge carbon storage in these environments.
Yeah, so my research program is looking at trying to understand how much carbon is stored in the peat, and collaborating with people across the UK and understanding how much carbon is stored in the trees to kind of get a full picture of how these ecosystems function and how we might use them in the fight against climate change.
Oh wow, and so are there any projects about increasing the amount of wet woodlands around?
We haven't got any projects at the moment thinking about increasing the number of wet woodlands because we don't know how they function. And so if we want to try and encourage restoration of wet woodlands, we need to know how existing wet woodlands function first. And so we're getting that baseline data now so we can start inferring in the future, yes, these wetlands are important carbon stores, we need more of them.
So of course, one of the concerns I would have, if this is really important habitat, wet woodlands, with climate change happening, what's likely to be the future of those wet woodlands that we have left?
And so wet woodlands are quite resilient ecosystems, but they're under threat from climate change through increasing temperatures leading to drought. So they're wetlands, they need to be wet underfoot. And as we experienced the last few years, our summers are getting hotter. And so as they get drier, a lot of these trees that are adapted to wet conditions might be pushed out by trees that are happier to live in those drier conditions if those wetlands dry out.
Oh, and what methods could be employed to keep our wetlands wet then?
Well, as with any kind of wetland restoration, re-wetting, so bringing the water table back to the surface of the soil or above the surface of the soil would be key to try and keep these locations as wet as possible, to keep that carbon locked in the ground and keep these wet woodlands happy.
Excellent. So things like reducing our water use and abstraction of the water and, reintroducing beavers and stuff, those are strategies that could be used.
Yeah, so beaver is actually a really interesting aspect when it comes to wet woodlands because not only can they in some ways destroy wet woodlands because of their activity. They can create new wet woodlands just by their nature of how they engineer the landscape. And so wet woodlands can be a co-benefit of the reintroduction of beaver, definitely.
Excellent. So these are a really important habitat and a rare habitat, so we do need to sort of be protecting them. Are there any other benefits that wet woodlands have over just the carbon storage?
So wet woodlands, we kind of think of them as islands of biodiversity. So often in the UK, because a lot of the landscape's been cleared, the wet woodlands that exist now are kind of pushed to their limits, and they're kind of islands amongst a sea of agricultural land. And so they have a lot of biodiversity, but that biodiversity is not connected to other parts of the landscape. But wet woodlands can be home to a wide variety of lichens, of fungi, of invertebrates, and birds as well. And so the willow tit, which is a really important species here in the UK, is declining rapidly, but they're at home in the wet woodlands. So we need to make sure that these ecosystems exist for the importance of all this biodiversity.
Excellent. So these are then biodiversity hotspots, the carbon storage. Is there anything that our viewers could do to help in terms of research or protecting wetlands that you're aware of?
Unfortunately, wet woodlands lie in this kind of spot between the UK caring about nature, but the UK caring about things being neat and tidy. And a wet woodland is not neat and tidy. They're often scrubby, they're wet, they're boggy. And so when it comes to clearing landscapes, often they're the first places to go. So one of the ways in which we can ensure the kind of conservation of wet woodlands in the future is making sure that if you have a scrubby area on your land, it's a bit wet underfoot, it's got willow, it's got alder. You might think of it as being kind of having no value to you, but it has value to the ecosystem itself. And so making sure that you don't clear those areas that you might think of as being the first to be cleared because you don't see that kind of value from them from a personal point of view.
Right. So this is a sort of balance between economy and environment. And of course, I suppose the economy always seems to work or win in terms of what's seen as low value land is the first stuff to be felled.
Yeah.
And we're not, I suppose, looking at the importance of biodiversity and carbon storage, of course.
Yeah, because I think a lot of time landscape is cleared in the UK when it's of low value. Well, people view it as low value. And so these low-lying riparian zones near rivers or floodplains, which have these scrubby willow, that people look at and go, oh, I can't do anything with that, I'll just clear it and make it something I wanted. That ecosystem is important. It's potentially storing a lot of carbon. It's an island of biodiversity for the plants and animal species there. And so we just have to switch our viewpoint. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. Is there anywhere that we can sort of see or get a better idea or understanding of the research that you and others are doing in this field?
Yeah, so I co-founded the Wet Woodland Research Network. It's led by Dr. Alice Milner at Royal Holloway University in collaboration with Professor Andy Baird at the University of Leeds and Dr. Emily Lyons at the University of Cambridge. And we put together this network to try and sell the importance of these ecosystems to the general public, to other academics, and to stakeholders as well. Alongside that, I have a project here at Slapton where we're trying to understand the carbon dynamics of the willow carr, which is a type of wet woodland here on site. And so we're measuring carbon fluxes, the water table dynamics, and we're looking at biodiversity here to try and get a full picture and understanding of how these ecosystems work. Because if we get a better understanding of how they work, we're in a better place to kind of advocate for them across the wider country.
Well, that's absolutely excellent. So thanks so much for that information. If you've got any questions or queries, then please contact our website and we can forward questions on to Scott if necessary. But thank you very much for that incredible insight into the importance of wet woodlands and wetlands generally across the globe in terms of climate mitigation.
Thank you very much.